All the officers were hanging in the central square, and everybody went there to spit at them.
Hanging like
Hanging, dead,
dead.
dead. I
So you
remember
saw
seeing
these
them in their
German.
uniforms with their black boots on early in the morning when we got up and the ship had landed. We saw the Statue of Liberty. I will never, never forget the sight of the Statue of Liberty, what it meant for us.
Okay, folks, it's time for our favorite podcast, Cut to the Chase. And I brought on a super special guest today, Suzanne Schneider, a Holocaust survivor who is going to tell her story. There are still people that deny that the Holocaust happened.
That's right. Absolutely.
And apparently, there was a survey done of the millennials and Gen Z. 63% did not know that 6 million Jews were murdered in the Holocaust, and almost half of them could not name one of the more than 40,000 camps or ghettos. Chancellor Olaf Scholz commented how depressing it was that so many people in Germany don't know anything about the Holocaust. And you had Elon Musk going around a couple weeks ago saying that, telling the Germans that they're placing too much emphasis on past guilt. They should just get over the past
Right.
guilt. So, unfortunately, we still have, I guess, what we would consider to be threats of not acknowledging the past and not learning from lessons. Now we're back to immigration quotas and all that stuff. But I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Suzanne, let's start from the top. Tell us the story.
Well, as you said, I was born in 1937, which was really 2 years before the war broke out. And needless to say, we had a very comfortable life. My father was very busy with his practice, and my mother was doing all kinds of things and traveling, and I was an only child. And I was born late. My father was 43 by the time I was born, so I was very, very spoiled. The main concern of both my parents, if I can tell you how comfortable the life was that I was a non-eater. So every day, the first question when my father came in from the office for dinner was, did she eat? It got to a point of total ridiculousness because I was very skinny, but very healthy, actually. And they imported, believe it or not, a nanny from Berlin who was trained in trouble and difficult eaters. And she was supposed to teach me and take care of me so that I would eat. So anyway, she insisted on a separate room with a closed door when she fed me. And one of my uncles, my father's older brother, decided to peek and see what the miracle was that I was eating for her. Well, he saw through the window that she was putting food in my mouth and pinching me to make me swallow. So needless to say, she was back on the train to Berlin the next day. Anyway, well, that's the kind of life we led. My mother had all kinds of help. She had a nanny for me. She had a cook. She had a maid. She had a laundress. She came from a very well-to-do family. Her father had been a banker. And during World War I, they all escaped to Vienna because they were afraid of the Russians. And my grandfather, whom I never knew, of course, my mother was the youngest of seven children, and she was six. Her father died of the flu, the Spanish flu that was prevalent in those days. But he left after the war. He had bought a centrally located commercial building in the city where they lived, which was called Stanislavov at that time, was Galicia, Poland. And his widow, through that building, there were rentals, apartment stores, all that. She managed it. And she was able to put her sons through law school. And my mother, as I said, had a PhD in Polish literature. And my mother was never allowed in the kitchen. She was told by her mother, you go play the piano and you study. That was it. My mother didn't know how to boil water when she married my father.
Wow.
She didn't need to boil water because, again, she had a cook and all that. So life was good.
Yeah.
Anyway, 1939 comes along, and there was the Hitler-Stalin Pact where they divide Poland. And all of a sudden, we were invaded by Russians because that was the part of Poland that they got. It was eastern, southeastern part of Poland, near Lvov. That's the big city around. As a matter of fact, that's where my mother went to university. Anyway, we was with Russians, occupied by Russians, but things were all right because I still have vague memories of Russian officers having dinner in our house. And then, of course, came 1930, September 1st, 1939, and Germans occupied Poland. That's the date. And that's when the war broke out. That's the date because all the other countries had signed some kind of a pact. And if Poland was invaded, they were going to start a war and fight Hitler. So very soon after, all we heard was the sound of motorcycles and tanks in our town, in our small town. And the Russians escaped back to Russia, and we were occupied by the Germans. And for a little while, it was all right. As a matter, again, I remember vaguely seeing German officers having dinner in our house. We were a prominent family, so I guess it was okay for them to eat in our house. Anyhow, very soon after, they started what they called akcja. That's Polish for action, where the trucks would come through town with loudspeakers telling certain groups of people to meet in the town square. And the first akcja was for people with any kind of disabilities. And my father's older sister, who lived in our town, she was hunchbacked. And so she was considered disabled, and she and her husband went to that meeting, and we never heard from them again.
Oh my
She
God.
left a 16-year-old son, my father's nephew. My father was very close to him, so he was like a son, and he was like an older brother for me. His name was Munio in Polish. Anyway, second akcja came a few weeks later, and that was for intelligentsia, all educated Jewish people to meet in the town square. And what amazes me this now is that people went. And being that I was the youngest of my generations of cousins, I had a lot of cousins who were much, much older. They were my father's family, my father's nephews and nieces. Two of them were, niece was a pharmacist, her husband was a pharmacist. Another nephew had just graduated from medical school in Prague and Czechoslovakia, and he had just married recently. They all went, which is absolutely, when I think about it now, how trusting they were. But they thought they were going to a labor camp, I think. Now, my father immediately said to my mother, "You stay home, you're not going anywhere, and I'm going to the countryside to see my patients, and I'm not going to be available." So they survived. And we never heard from them again. Obviously, now I realize that they were probably taken to the woods and shot. But I don't remember my parents talking about or anything except that, things were bad, getting worse. And one day, I'm home with my mother, and oh, by the way, all Jewish women were called Sarah by the Germans. Uh, she told me to go into another room, to the bedroom, and I heard German soldiers come into the house, and they made her, well, this I found out later, of course. She had sewn all her jewelry into a girdle in case they had to run away or whatever. And they made her take off the sara, and they made her take off the girdle. And finally, when they left, when I came out of the room, I saw a huge gash on her head. She had been hit by one of the soldiers with the butt of the gun. And anyway, a few weeks later, maybe a little months later, we had to move. Suddenly, I realized they're packing all suitcase and whatever. We had to move, and we moved to a ghetto. Now, people in the United States think that there was only one ghetto in Warsaw, but that's not true. Warsaw is the famous ghetto, but every town in Poland had its own ghetto where all the Jewish people from that community were herded together and moved to the ghetto surrounded by barbed wire with German guards all around. And no Jewish people were not allowed in and out of the ghetto, even though they had the Jewish star. By then, they had had to sew a Jewish star, even me as a little girl, I had a Jewish star sewn on my blouse or whatever I was wearing. Anyway, my mother and I were not allowed out of the ghetto, but because, again, because my father was a physician and there were a lot of epidemics all over the place. So he was allowed in and out of the ghetto, which was a big plus because he would bring us food from the farms and things like that. Anyway, we were in the ghetto. I don't know exactly how long, I would say a few months. Of course, my cousin also, the one who had lost his parents, the one whose mother was hunchbacked, was in the ghetto with us as well. Now, we were all put into one room house. There were my parents and I, and there was a young woman who was a dentist and she was pregnant. Her husband had been killed, and her elderly parents. We were all in one room. And that's how we lived. And every night in the ghetto, there was always somebody on guard duty in the different little huts or towns where they lived to listen to the traffic coming from a larger city, to the truck traffic. And the largest city was called Tarnopol. Our town was called Zbarash, but this was Tarnopol. And there was a big army reserve there. And if they heard the traffic in the middle of the night, they knew that there were German soldiers coming to the ghetto to just pick up anybody they could and just take them away. So they had come up with this in our little house in the attic. They had made a hiding place in the attic. And my mother, that one night, my mother was on duty. She was up during the night at the window listening for the sound of traffic coming in. And she heard it and she alerted the rest of the people in our house to go up into the attic. The one advantage my parents had was that not only I was an only child, but I was old enough to know to keep quiet. So they had a ladder and we all climbed into the attic and they were able to pull the ladder up and they closed the attic. And the soldiers, we heard them downstairs. I remember they were rummaging through our stuff and then they left. And so then we survived. A lot of people got caught. Anyway, also there was what they called a Judenrat, which was a group of wealthy Jews or whatever, educated Jews who survived to be a group of Jewish. Um, they worked with the Germans. They worked with the Germans to alert them where people were and so forth. And they cooperated with the Germans. And my father was asked to join that, and he absolutely refused. That he always had an excuse that there are too many sick people, and he just can't be part of that. So one day I am told that they're sending me out of the ghetto. I was by then, I think about 3 or 4, because I remember that because my mother's sitting there crying, and I tell her in Polish, which is the language we spoke, don't cry, mommy, I want to live. So what my father had done was made arrangements with my nanny, my former nanny, Polish nanny. Her name was, I still remember her name, Michalina, that he rented an apartment for her in another town, that she would take me there, and she had a little boy about my age, and she would take me there out of the ghetto. And he managed, I don't remember, well, he managed to get me out of the ghetto. Again, I'm sure he either paid off the guards or because they knew him, they allowed it. Otherwise, that wouldn't have happened. And she met us on a park bench, and she and I and her little boy, we went to that town, and I could hear in the middle of the night shooting going on. And I remember throwing up because I was so nervous that my parents were being killed. So I was well aware of what was going on. And after a while, she decided she didn't want to stay in that town anymore. Her husband had stayed in our town in Spanish. She wanted to go back. She obviously notified my father somewhat. And all I remember, she brings me back to our town in the middle of the night. And my father's sitting on a bench and he's waiting, and there's an elderly lady waiting next to him. And so my father, of course, happy to see me, and he says, now I have to go with the other lady. and her name was Helena. And I have to go with the lady, that's all. And of course, I went, and she took me to her house, which was a little thatched roof cottage, two-room cottage. And then when I got into the cottage with her, there was my mother. He had been able to sneak her out of the ghetto. Again, probably paid off the guards or whatever, but he got my mother out of the ghetto. And the two of us was so overjoyed, crying, happy to be together. So this whole house consisted of one large room where the old lady lived with a daughter of hers who just had had a baby girl. And then attached to it, separated by a wall, was a chicken coop. And that's where we spend the day. My mother and I spend the day in the chicken coop. And when I speak to kids around here, I tell them that the chickens aren't as stupid as people think, because I had a chicken. One of the chickens was my pet, and it responded to all my commands and gave me its paw and all that. So they're not so stupid. So we don't know where my father is by then.
Yeah.
We don't know where my cousin is either. We're just the two of us there. And then we hear from the lady, she found out that they declared the ghetto Judenfrei, which meant that they raised the ghetto. Whoever they caught, they took away, and that was the end of the ghetto. And we didn't know where my father was. But a couple of nights later, we hear scratching at the door, and I even remember the time, 4 o'clock in the morning, and there was my father. Somehow or other, he managed to escape, and he joined us. He stayed with us. And so we just spent the day, all day in the chicken coop. My parents taught me how to read and taught me all kind of stories. And at night, apparently what had happened was that my father, on his going to visit patients, he would stop off at that house, and he prepared the hiding place for us by in the center of that, on the corner actually, of that one big room, there was this huge baking oven where the women baked their bread once a week. And it looked like a pizza oven now, with the big round opening. And what my father did in there, he put in steps inside the flue, and he closed up. There was like between the ceiling and the top of the oven, there was an open space. What he did is he would bring in his medical bag, he would bring a brick at a time, and he bricked it up. So he closed it to the ceiling, and they put a mattress on top of the oven. And we would go in with the steps in the flue and climb and sleep in the on top of the oven. That was our day. The day was spent at the chicken coop, and we slept there. What was very smart, intelligent, or lucky, I don't know, but we were across the street from the Gestapo, and there were lots of German officers around. And this daughter, Yaja, this old lady, was absolutely gorgeous. I'm sorry, I have a picture of her, but anyway, she was absolutely gorgeous. She looked like Marlena Dietrich. Beautiful. She was in her 20s. And needless to say, the Germans were coming over to visit her while we're sitting in the room in the chicken coop, separated by a wall. And they talk about the war. And my father has a map hanging, and he's listening to this, and he's putting pins in it to the progress of the war. And we were always had a lot of food, because these
Chicken.
Germans would bring food to the women. So we had plenty of food. And one day, though, all of a sudden, we hear this chicken carrying on loud and flying into the chicken coop. And I'm playing with my chicken, and I'm outside. We had like a curtain that my father had made out of straw. My parents were behind the straw, but I was in front, and I was playing with the chicken, and this chicken flies in, and followed by a German Shepherd. And it was a matter of seconds that we would have been discovered. But German officers were clean. They weren't going into a dirty chicken coop, but he whistled, and the dog turned around and
Oh
left.
my God.
And my father grabbed me, I remember, so hard, and he sat me down that I lost my breath. And he got very frightened that he hurt me. But luckily, nothing really happened.
I got a couple questions.
Sure.
Okay, because I'm hoping that there are going to be people that are listening that maybe they don't know the whole story, of Nazi Germany and all that. So there are a couple terms
Yeah.
I want, you to help the audience understand. Uh,
Yeah.
what was the Gestapo?
Gestapo was the secret police, German secret police. They
And
were the most powerful group of Germans, officers.
okay, so you're still in Poland, but
Poland, yeah.
how
Well, totally occupied by Germans.
occupied by Germans? They came in, and even though they had this agreement, they didn't live by the
Oh, the
agreement.
Russians had gone back to Russia. There were no more Russians.
And so, how far do you have any idea how far that cottage was from your original place in Poland?
Or the town
Yeah.
couldn't have been awfully far, no, because it was a very small town
The the lady
within walking distance.
the lady whose cottage it was is
Yes,
Lena,
Helena.
Helena, and Yadra is her last.
Yaja was her daughter.
Okay, so were they both living in this cottage?
Yes, they were in the front room. That's where she was welcoming all the German soldiers. I mean, officers.
So the German officers are all hot to trot on Yadra,
Yeah, of
coming
course.
over, chatting
Yeah,
up,
of course.
and telling her updates about the war, which the
Yes,
father was hearing.
yes,
And that's kind of how he figured out what was going on with the war.
yes,
That's amazing.
absolutely.
So why was Helena so nice? I mean,
Helena? Okay,
Helena
let me tell you the story, what happened there.
sounds
I
like she's risking her life.
absolutely risking her life, her daughter's life, and her granddaughter's life. I'll tell you now the story. I found this out years later when we went to Poland, to Krakow, to see her grandson. We were invited to Poland by the not Polish, Israeli embassy to see the family who saved our lives. And her grandson told me the story that his mother, Yaja, he was born after the war, told him what had happened was my father was walking in the street out of the ghetto, and his grandmother approached him and he said, Doctor, my daughter had a baby and she's blind. Would you come over and take a look at her and see if you can do anything? So my father said, Yes, I'll come tonight. I'll take a look at her. He came there and he put some kind of, now I didn't know all this time, just 2015. He put some salve on her eyes and he said, I'll be back tomorrow night to see her again to see if I helped her. And he comes back and she's got her eyes open and she can look around and see. And the two women thought it was a miracle. And the grandmother said, Helena said, we don't have any money. We don't have anything to pay. Not that money meant anything in those days anyway. He said, Well, would you be willing to hide my wife and my daughter? So Helena told him, Well, doctor, come back again one night. I will discuss it with my daughter and we'll see. And sure enough, that was the decision because she said, Yes, we will hide them. And they would, if they would have been found out that they were keeping Jews there, they would have been done for. However, what interesting thing the grandson told me again in 2015 was that one of the soldiers, German officers, said to her, be careful. Like he had a feeling there was something going.
Yeah.
Just be careful. I'm warning you, be careful.
All right. Now I know this is a side part of the story, but how many chickens were in the chicken
A
coop?
lot.
Did you
Shells of chickens.
did you like study chicken behavior? Like, I mean, you must have been like bored out of your mind.
No, first of all, my mother had books with her, and
Okay.
they were telling me stories, and they took care of me, and I had my chicken to play with.
Yeah, yeah. So
I had my chicken.
the chickens were friendly.
Yeah, they were very friendly. We had eggs all the time, fresh eggs, all that. It was not so bad.
All right, this is an interesting part of the story. Okay. All right. So now you're there. How long were you in this house with
I figured because I remember being there in the summer. And then I remember Christmas being there because all these the Germans, the officers brought all this fantastic goose, stuffed goose, and all kinds of food we had. They brought for Christmas. And then we were liberated. This was 1943, by the way, because we were liberated in March 1944 by the Russians. They came back. So we must have been there about 9 months.
Okay.
So we were there through winter, summer, and winter, really, because winters in Poland are rough, like Russian winters, very cold.
Did you understand what was going on?
Yes, all the time.
You did. Okay.
That's why they had that facility that I was, by the way, this is an aside, but we whispered the whole time so our voices couldn't be heard. When we came out of hiding eventually, I had no voice. I had completely lost my voice. I was whispering. I could not. My father said that my vocal cords had totally atrophied because my voice had not been used. It took about a year for me to slowly regain my voice.
Okay. All right. So let's go back to the story. You're living there. You're in the chicken coop. You're sleeping above the stove. Your mom's reading to your father comes back. It's the three of you. You're listening to these German Gestapo guys. What else do you remember about those 9 months there?
Okay, well, that again, it was hearing bombs and all that stuff all the time. And also during the time while we were there, apparently they ran out of either money or whatever, because I remember we still have a chain, a gold chain. My father took links off the gold chain and he gave him to Helena to go to the market to sell the pieces of gold to get funding, whatever they needed it for, I don't know. And also, 3 times I remember my mother was, by the way, very extremely brave. She had to go out at night. There was a Ukrainian doctor who was a friend of my father's, and apparently he had either my parents, for I don't know, furniture or whatever. But she went to him 3 times in the middle of the night. Now, my father wouldn't go out because everybody knew him in town. My mother was not as well known. So she went out in the middle of the night to Dr. Tarashchuk's, and he must have given her money. And so she came back. She did it 3 times while we were in hiding. And then my father and I would stay up most of the night just waiting for her. And he would tell me fairy tales and all kinds of stories to keep me occupied because we were so worried about her.
Yeah.
All right. So finally, on March 4th, 1944, and I remember the date clearly, we hear the word Tovarish right in the backyard in the garden. Now, I don't know if you people listening to me know what the word Tovarish means in Russian, but it means comrade. So we knew the Russians had come back. We knew that the front was moving. We knew we could hear the bombardments and all that. Anyway, we came out of hiding. They knew right away that we were Jews who were hiding there, and it was hugging and kissing, and we were so happy they had liberated us. And who else appears but my cousin, my 16-year-old cousin?
Wow.
That's another story that I have to tell you later. Anyway, we were there. All of a sudden, the front moved back. The Germans moved back, and the Russians retreated again. But this time, we did not go into hiding. We just went with the Russian army. And you have to understand that this was March in Poland. The roads were not paved. The snow was still high. The roads were all mud. I was skinny little thing that we would have lost in the mud. So we ran away with the horses and the tanks and the soldiers. And my cousin carried me on his back. And he never let me forget it for the rest of his life. And he lived to be 90. I carried you on my back. He always teased me. He was like he was 12 years older than I was. Anyway, then finally the front moved back again, and the Russians went back to our town's Barish, and we went back with them. And we got back into our house, and apparently what had happened was they caught the German officers totally unprepared for their return, and they were in the movie house. And the next day, as the Russians don't listen to the Geneva Convention, does anybody know what the Geneva Convention is?
Not supposed to kill prisoners.
No, it's supposed to take good care of your
Yeah.
prisoners.
Well,
Well, the Russians, they could care less. All the officers were hanging in the central square, and everybody went there to spit at them.
hanging like hang like
Hanging, dead,
dead.
dead. I
So you
remember
saw
seeing
these
them in their
German,
uniforms with their black boots on,
you
with
saw
their
these
heads
German
hanging.
officers hung dead. You're there, six
All
years
of us,
old,
my parents, everybody,
sitting on them.
spitting.
Okay, so when you're
Oh, one thing very important I have to remind everybody that when we were still in the ghetto, my mother had made little pouches that the three of us wore around our necks. And I was told every day since I was a non-eater, if I tell you to swallow this, you swallow it. This was strychnine, poison,
yeah,
because if they were caught,
yeah.
they were not going anywhere. They would swallow it, they would get poisoned, and I was going to be poisoned. And of course, they worried because I would probably spit it out. But no, I knew enough I would have swallowed it.
Okay, so you're saying you hear comrade, you all run out, you see the Russian soldiers, and you literally walk away from
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Do you remember like waving goodbye to Helena?
Oh, yeah, yeah, of course. We hugged and kissed and thanked her.
Yeah.
She stayed in the house with her daughter. Now, her daughter, this is another aside, her daughter was married to a Polish officer who was in D-Day. He was one of the Polish pilots who flew the planes and parachuted into Europe during D-Day,
Wow.
England.
My God.
Yes,
All right. So you're walking away, literally walking away with
yes.
whatever you guys had, and you walk off. Where do you go?
We don't go. We went with the Russians. We just wanted to run away from the Germans. We didn't think, we didn't care. My parents then, and
Just
the
wherever
fact
they
that my
took you,
cousin was alive.
wherever they took you.
Yeah, but
Which
we came back. Within a few days, we went back.
you
That's
went
what
back to your original house.
our town, right? And that's when they found the German officers there. It was only a matter of days.
Were you able to get back in your house?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
do you remember
Okay,
like
so
what was it?
now we're under Russian occupation,
Yeah.
okay? Again, Russian officers eating in our house. My father was made a major in the Russian army. He was head of the polyclinic. That was my first grade. By then I was 7 years old, 44, I was seven. I went to a Russian school. I was taught in Russian. I said we had to bow to Stalin, we had to bow to Lenin, we wore uniforms, boys and girls together. All the kids had their heads shaved, except for me. Take a guess why. The kids I talked to, they all know. There's always an answer. Think.
Think, why weren't you? It had nothing to do with the chicken,
It has to do with your head too, because you're shaved.
Well, I give up. I give up. I'm not
Lice. Lice.
lice.
My
Oh,
father said, you don't have to worry about my daughter. I know what to do. If she gets lice, I'll know how to take care of it.
yeah.
So here I am, the only kid with very blonde, that was very blonde hair, and all the other kids, you couldn't tell the boys from the girls.
All right. So you're now back in Poland, which is now occupied by Russia, and you're learning,
It was actually not Poland and it was considered Russia,
and so
even
you're
though it
living
had been.
there and learning Russian. Now you're learning a
Yes,
second
yeah,
language. Well, first
that's
you're learning how to speak again, right?
yeah. When my voice slowly got back, and of course I spoke Russian fluently. I'm very good at languages
And
anyway.
you're bowing down to Stalin and Lenin's statues.
Yeah, not statues, paintings, pictures, and
Do
all. Yeah.
you have any idea who those guys were, or you're just doing what
Oh
you're
yeah, of course. Are you kidding? Papa Lenin, Papa Stalin. Yeah, yeah.
All right, so how long?
Oh, one more thing I have to add.
You can add as much as you want to.
Okay. Got back into our house. And what's standing there is my mother's concert grant. My mother was a very fine pianist. And she sits down at the piano and she starts playing, and the piano is in perfect tune.
Oh, wow.
So the piano, the Jews were chased away, but the German officers or whoever lived in our house, officers
They kept it
probably,
in tune.
loved the piano and kept it in perfect tune.
Oh, yeah, that
That
was
was that.
Bach, Beethoven, Mozart.
Oh, you name it.
Yeah,
Exactly. Exactly. So
well, then,
anyway, so we stayed there for quite a while. Everything was going well. I would say less than a year. One night, banging on the door, Russian soldiers this time. They heard Jews had gold. Now, where did they think we had gold? We had nothing. We had lost everything practically. They started looking with bayonets, going through butter, whatever, bricks of butter and cans and whatever else. They were looking for gold, which of course they didn't find because there wasn't any. But anyway, the next day my father said, "That's it. We're not staying here anymore. We are going west. Enough is enough. We can't stay with the Russians now anymore."
yeah.
So we packed up whatever they had, I don't know much, and we went to the train tracks. And you didn't know when a train would, this is, we're talking August of 1945. Yeah, August 1945. And we're just sitting by the train tracks, and my cousin, of course, is with us. And we're just waiting for a train to pull up that's going well. And we waited about 2 weeks in a tent, waiting for the train. Yep. And finally, a train did arrive, and it was going west, and it ended up in Free Poland. By then, part of that Russia had become Free Poland. And that had been actually a German part of Germany, but it was became Poland. And so we moved to a town called Bytom. And somehow or other, I don't know what went on. I started school, Polish school this time. I was in second grade by then. My mother started a kindergarten for Jewish children. And my father opened up a practice. He must have gotten, I'm just guessing at that, a German doctor's office because he had all the equipment there. And so he opened up a practice, and I remember his shingle was for specialists in venereal diseases because at that time penicillin became available.
Oh,
So he had a huge practice of men who came to be treated for venereal diseases. Now, our apartment was behind the office. So in the middle of the night, oh, he didn't have a nurse. He gave the shots, and he had to give shots every 6 hours of penicillin. So he had male patients sleeping in his office. And then in the middle of the night, they were wandering around while we were sleeping to look for a bathroom. But those are memories that I have. And we started getting care packages from the United States from my aunt who had escaped earlier. And I was always late for school because they wouldn't let me leave till I finished my breakfast. And my teacher, who was, I was not allowed to say I was Jewish because already there was sounds about anti-Semitism going on. So I went with my class to church and I could pray and I did all the right things, but she knew I was Jewish because I brought her coffee and dry milk and all kinds of things that my aunt had sent from the United States. Only Jewish people got care packages there. So she knew I was Jewish
oh, God.
to assuage her because I was always late for class. I was a very good student. I loved school, but I was always late because they wouldn't let me out till I finished my breakfast. Okay? All right. Anyway, one day I come back from school, almost to the end of the year. We're leaving. I knew my mother had gone to Warsaw and she came back, and they must have gotten permission to leave and go west. And that was it. We packed up and we left heading west. And we ended up in Czechoslovakia in a DP camp. Do you know what a DP camp is?
I did like 3 days ago and I can't remember it now.
Okay, displaced persons.
Okay.
we were without any kind of, really, we were displaced. We
Yeah,
weren't
like
Polish.
refugees.
Yeah. So they put the women separate from the men. So I was with my mother, and my father was in the camp too, but not far. And oh, I just loved being there because he came every day to get me, and he took me to see the zoo there in Prague. This was right outside of Prague. Beautiful city that was not destroyed by the war. We went to see the castle. It was very nice. But at night we had to stay up. My mother and I, there was just a light bulb hanging, and we had to pick up bed bugs because the place was infested with
Hmm.
bed bugs, and that's what we did. We just picked them off. I remember. And then finally, somehow or other, my father must have gotten in touch or whatever. One of his sisters, my father was one of seven. She had been in France all along, and she survived in Free France. They were lived in Paris, but during the war, they escaped to Marseille in France. He must have gotten in touch or found her or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, that's where we decided to go. Once the train came, we could have gone to Germany, and because their final goal was to get to the United States. That was the end of the,
Your parents.
yeah. But my mother wanted to go to Germany. There was a DP camp in Germany too, and she had heard that you could get out of it sooner to go to Israel. But my father, by then, they were talking, Israel wasn't Israel yet, but a lot of people were going. But my father said, I'm not going there because there are too many doctors there. And I remember, I swear to God. Anyhow, we ended up taking the train again and going to France, to Paris.
And you don't speak French.
No French, nobody, not one
Nobody,
of.
you all just going there like, how do you do?
How do you do? Russian,
Bonjour. Bonjour.
German, I speak pretty well understand. Polish,
Yeah,
no French.
no
Okay.
French.
Okay, so my uncle Betzal and my aunt's husband, who was a furrier, they were back in their apartment in Paris, big apartment. Of course, we were going to he came to the train to pick us up with a taxi. The reason I'm bringing it up is that while we were in Poland those few months or maybe a year, my father was able to, the one thing you could invest in those days for security was gold. And my father started buying gold coins as a security blanket. And he had a special suitcase built with a double bottom. And the gold coins were put in the double bottom. And my uncle picked us up at the train station, put the luggage in the trunk, brought the luggage into his their apartment, but forgot that suitcase.
No.
I swear, the suitcase with the gold coins never reappeared.
Oh
My
no.
parents, my father never forgave him. Never forgave.
He just forgot about it?
Yeah, he just took two suitcases and the third one or fourth one, whatever it
Yeah,
was, forgot about it.
yeah.
So
Mm.
probably the taxi driver never even figured it that he had a treasure in his. Anyway, I started school in France.
Yeah.
That's
Paris.
in Paris. Oh, in Paris. Strangely enough, I was always a very good student, excellent student.
Yeah.
I did very well in a French school, even though I learned the language very quickly. And I was like, they used to sit the kids. By the way, the schools in France are not, but in my time, were not mixed. It was girls only and boys only. And the girl who got the highest grade for that marking period sat in the first seat, and the second one in the second seat. That's how they were sat. I was always in the first seat because I always got the best marks. Teachers liked me. Anyway, my father took care of me because he was not allowed to do anything in France. Nothing. He could only go to the hospitals to just observe what was going on, but there was nothing you could do there. You
So
couldn't
even though he didn't go to Israel because he was like, there's too many
see
doctors,
any doctors.
he goes to Paris and then they don't
No,
allow.
because his goal was really to go to to the United States.
Okay, yeah,
Because
yeah,
he knew once he got to the United States, he would be able to. As I'm talking to you, I'm looking at his certificate. Well,
yeah.
I'll tell you later. Anyhow, to make a long story short, He was my mother. He took care of me for shoes. He took me to museums. He did everything. We got very close. And I went to school to elementary school. I graduated from elementary school. By then, I had already changed my name because nobody could pronounce my first name. My first name was Juta, Ziuta. Nobody could pronounce it. So I decided to pick Suzanne, and that's how I became Suzanne.
Juta.
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 Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, finally, they got their papers and their visa. 5 years. 5 years we waited to get a visa to come to the United States. We finally got the papers. They packed all the stuff. Highest, by the way, was instrumental. Do you know Highest? You
No,
must know Highest.
no.
Oh, it's a Jewish philanthropy organization that helped all the immigrants.
Okay.
They're wonderful, wonderful. They're still around. Anyhow, everything was packed. We were on the train going to Le Havre, which is the port on the English Channel. No, on the English Channel, where you take the ship and you go to the United States. It's a direct one train that goes directly to the port. And while we were in the train, I'm laughing now, it wasn't funny. An inspector came to look at the papers, and all our papers were in order. We had our visa, we had tickets for the ship, and we get off the train. No, yeah, we get off the train to go on the ship, which was already there. All our luggage had been loaded on the ship. My father realizes that he doesn't have his papers. Now, remember,
Oh,
5 years of waiting, visas, permits, tickets for the ship, gone. So by then I was 14 years old.
yeah.
So they sent me to look to the train was still
The
there.
train. Go
So
back to the
go
train
back to the train into the car where we were to. I was too scared to get into the train, into the car of the train, because I was afraid it would take off to go back to Paris. So I looked through the window and I didn't see the papers. So here we are. I go back there. Everybody's crying. We're so upset. What are we going to do? No more apartment in nowhere. So we're stuck. The train leaves and goes back to Paris. We tell the station master there that what the story, what happened. 2 hours later, he gets a call from Paris, 2.5 hours. They found the paper
Oh my God.
between my father, instead of slipping them into his briefcase, he slipped them into between, he was sitting by the window, the seat and the window. And that's the picture, whoever found them. I mean, they were worth a lot of money. There were papers for people to go to the United States, permits to go to the United States, visas.
Did
And
you remember your mother's reaction when your father said, I left it, I can't find the
we
paper?
were just happy kissing each other. Nobody yelled at anybody. And what had happened was that the ship that was leaving, that we were supposed to be on, which was called whatever, it was a small ship. So all our luggage was there on the ship already, and the ship had left
Without you.
without us.
Yeah.
So what happened was that we stayed in Le Havre for 3 days, and we got highest again somehow or other. My father got in touch with them. They got us tickets to a larger ship, which was called Liberté. It was a beautiful part of the French line ship. And it only took 5 days for that ship to reach the United States, where the other ship was De Grasse, that's what it was called. Took 8 days.
Yeah.
We both ended up in New York on the whatever by the where the ships land.
Ellis Island?
No, 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 no.
Liberty?
Oh no, in Manhattan. And the first thing, early in the morning when we got up and the ship had landed, we saw the Statue of Liberty. And
Oh,
2 days, I
yeah.
will never, never forget the sight of the Statue of Liberty, what it meant for us. As a matter of fact, my daughter promised me that when I die and she has me cremated, she's going to go to the Statue of Liberty and throw my ashes there.
Did
That's how
you
important.
know what the Statute of Liberty was at
Oh,
that?
yes.
Like you're like in the boat, and you're like, we got,
Oh,
as soon as you see the Statute of Liberty,
oh my
there.
God, are you kidding? Tears flowing. And you won't believe that. But all our luggage that had been on the slowest ship, because it got there about the same time as we did, it was right there on the dock.
Oh, just by itself? Nobody like
Yeah, we're
picked it up
just
and took it?
standing there.
Wow, that's a testament to mankind that nobody's.
No, Highest picked us up,
Yeah.
put us up in a hotel on 31st Street in Manhattan. So my parents started looking around for a place to, apartment and all that, and for looking to settle somewhere. And I just sat all day long in the hotel. This was summer, by the way. I had finished my school, as a matter of fact. This was June 14th, we came here. I sat in the hotel lobby. In those days, the hotel rooms didn't have TVs. But there was a TV in the lobby, not in the room, but in the lobby. So I spent the whole summer sitting watching American TV and talking to the young man who was behind the desk. And by the time we found an apartment in Brooklyn and we went there and I started high school, I was 14, I was a freshman. I had a thick French accent. They called me Frenchie, but I could speak English pretty well.
Yeah.
Television jargon and
I
see commercials.
Well, your accent is perfect, I have to say. So now you're on your fourth language.
Yeah.
That it? Did you learn any more other languages?
Yeah,
Sort of
Spanish. I speak Spanish.
speak Spanish. That's it? Five languages. That's it?
And when I go to Italy, I do very well there too.
Yeah. All right. All right. So
But I
tell me
want,
about your 16-year-old.
wait a minute. I asked the kids that I speak to, what do you think I did? Because I told them about the chickens and all that stuff. The kids love that story with the chickens, but that's another thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
I love it too. I love it too.
yeah, it's a great. I mean, the kids asked me, "Did you eat the chicken when you were liberate your chicken?" I said, "No." Then one kid's asked, Did you bring the chicken with you to the United States?" And I said, "No, I couldn't get a visa for the chicken." And I said,
All right. So wait. You got to explain this. So when you're saying you're telling this to the kids, this is because you're giving the same presentation on your
"Yes,
story
exactly."
to
Oh, I have an
high
appointment
students.
I have an appointment on Tuesday.
So
On
you go
the,
to like
I'm
schools.
going to a church to I've spoken there before to their eighth graders.
Okay, yeah. So you give your story to them and then they ask questions like
Well, the kids, the
they all
boys
love the
always
chicken.
ask me stupid question. The
Yeah,
girls are smart. I said, "What did I do as a career?"
yeah,
So the boys, one boy raises his hand. You worked from no, you were a pizza delivery person because they tell him about the oven.
yeah.
It looks like a pizza oven. But the girls, you were a language teacher. I say, bingo, you got it.
Okay, there are a couple of loose ends here. You said you wanted to talk more about your 16-year-old cousin.
Oh, I must tell you that
Yeah,
story.
tell me that story.
Okay. While we were in hiding, the old lady Helena comes and tells my father that she saw my cousin Munyu being led with a group of Jews to the woods. So we figured that was it. He was going to be shot. All of a sudden, and my father said shiva for him with ashes on his head. It was a whole thing. He was very attached to that boy because he had basically raised him. Um, who appears? My cousin. As we're liberated by the Russian. He knew where we were.
Yeah,
So he shows up. Now, here's his story. When my father went into hiding, he made arrangements with a barber in one of the villages, Polish barber, that my cousin, my father's nephew, would be coming. Would he hide him? And he said yes. So he had told my cousin what village to go to, follow the stars. It was in August, follow the stars and go to that village. And so he did go. I mean, we found this out later, of course. He went to the village. He didn't know where the barber's house was. And he sees a young woman walking her dog in the street. So he stops her and he said, "Would you know where the barber's house is?" She points it out to him. It was a small town. So he knocks on the door and the barber opens the door and he says, "I know who you are. You're Dr. Schmayek's nephew, and I was expecting you, but I cannot hide you." So there is my cousin. He's 16 years old. He knows where we are, but he knows there's no room for him. What is he going to do? Knock on the door. The young woman that he met in the street comes in. She says, "Is there anything I can do to help?" So the barber tells her the story that he can't hide my cousin. So she said, "Let me go home. I'll speak to my husband and my father-in-law, and we'll see what we can do." She comes back, now total strangers, remember that. Comes back and gets him. She says, "You come with me. We're going to hide you in a hayloft in a barn." And that's where he survived the war. She had three little daughters. He asked her, he said later, he said, "How could you do this? You had three children. You know, you all would have been shot." She said, "Well," she said, "I thought about one of my girls having the same problem that you did, young man. And I was hoping that somebody would be there to help her."
Yeah.
And it turned out that her husband and her father-in-law were both partisans. Now, do you know what partisans are?
I mean, I know, I guess it's a different connotation than what I know it to be.
Well, say it.
Well, the partisan that I know, I guess it would be your political uh
But agreed with you. Yeah.
mindset.
They were the ones that blew up the trains from the woods,
Yeah.
the German trains. They were, what do they call them now? Something. But anyway, there's a different word in English, which I don't remember. I'll think of it. But anyway, they were partisans. And after the war, it turned out that the barber, which is probably why my father had heard of him, had 30 people in a cave that he was saving and feeding. And they were the ones that put their foot down and told him, "You can't bring anybody else here." So we figured it out. That's how my father had heard of him, that
Yeah.
he was helping people. So isn't that a beautiful
That is a
story?
beautiful story. And all this horror, there was some people, lots of people that went beyond the call of duty and
My cousin stayed with them. My cousin never came to the United States with us to be with us. He stayed in France because he went to France with us because he married a girl from Tunisia. And so he stayed in Corsica. He lived in Corsica and he brought the grandchildren and the children of the young woman, he was in touch the whole time with them. Yeah.
nice. All right, so I want to end on the last part of the story. As far as I understand, you referenced 2015, and you got reconnected with
The
I want
grandson.
with Yaja and
No,
Helen.
no, Yajo had died.
She had died. Okay, so it
And
was
her
her.
daughter, the baby daughter, had died. Had died also, but she had children. Her husband came back from the war, the one that was a pilot, and she had two more children, and one of the boys was named after my father.
All right, so how did you reconnect with them? There was a
I got
group.
contacted by the Israeli embassy from Warsaw. Don't forget, I didn't tell you that, but I had been interviewed by Steven Spielberg in
Okay.
1995, and when I still lived in Great Neck on Long Island, I had a film crew in the house and all that. They interviewed me, and the tape is in at Yad Vashem, and it's in the museum in Washington, the Holocaust Museum, and it's in New York in the Holocaust Museum. So somehow or other, they were going through the files, and they got me, and they got in touch with me. And they said, "Would you like to be in touch with the grandson of the woman who saved your life?" I immediately jumped on it, of course. And we started texting each other, not texting, emailing each other. He only speaks Polish, but he had it translated, and we got in touch and we met them. My whole family went, my grandchildren, my children, my husband, who was alive at the time. We all went to Krakow, and we had this beautiful ceremony to honor them, to honor the family. And also, that we had the ambassador, Israeli ambassador, the consul, American consul, and the director of the museum, which was called Galizia Museum. And that's where the ceremony took place. And we rented a van, and we all went together to Auschwitz and the other camps, and we spent about 2 weeks in Poland.
Wow. This is the Righteous Among Nations book?
Yes, correct, correct.
Yeah.
That's
So
correct.
you weren't just the only one that they reconnected
There
with.
was one more family.
Yeah. Well, listen, this is an amazing story, and I'm glad.
Wait, let me just finish that. My father,
Oh my
who
God, I cut.
spoke no English, right?
Yeah.
After 2 years, was able to pass the medical boards that were given to medical students from at New York, which is the hardest one in this country.
Yeah.
And he got his medical license, and he was able to practice medicine in the United States.
Well, that's
And he was
amazing.
over 60 years old by the time he did that.
That's just amazing.
Is that amazing?
It's amazing. The whole story is amazing. I'm amazed that I know you and that, you love, I wouldn't say you love me, but you like me. This was.
Well, listen, I love Steffi, so he rubs off on you.
All right. Well, you know what? I'm just looking here. All right. I think that's gonna do it.
Good.
Did we cover everything? I mean, I know you said something about your father's, I think that was the last part of the story you were referencing.
Yeah, and he had a sister who was in the United States who had escaped through China from Vienna. And
Wow.
that's the one who sent us the care packages.
Nice, nice. All right. Zuta
Juta Shmayuk.
Shmayu.
Juta Shmayuk.
Zuta Shmayu.
Juta. That's it. Perfect.
Okay. We're gonna leave it on that.
And became
Everybody,
wait a minute, became Suzanne Sharrett, because
yeah.
my father changed his name here in this country. The worst part was that in the school where I went in Paris, you wore uniform. It was a public school, but there were uniforms, and you had to embroider your initials on your uniform, and mine were SS.
That's horrible.
Don't ask what went on right after the war
Oh, yeah,
with
yeah.
SS on my.
Well, I guess there was a 1 in 26 times 2 chance that that would be it, right? How many letters in the alphabet? 26, something like that. All right. That is going to,
Done. You happy?
I'm always happy to see you. Okay.
All right.
I'm glad that we could do this on.
Did anybody else listen to this?
Well, this is being recorded, and then we're going to, in about 2 weeks, we're going to post the show live and promote it and all this stuff. And you get to see it and all
Keep
that.
doing it. It's a good time to do it now with what's going on with Israel and all that.
I know, and the immigration, and we're closing the borders. And, back in the day, 1933, the United States passed some horrific an Immigration Act in 1924 called the Johnson-Reed Act, which kept the borders closed. And now we're closing the borders and people don't remember history. And so that's one of the reasons why we're here today to remind everybody.
Your timing is impeccable.
Impeccable.
Impeccable, your timing for this, because it's like crazy over here where I live.
Yeah.
Stopping me all over. When are you? Because I made my spiel over here a few years ago. There are a lot of new people living here. You've got to talk again. And
all right, well, this is another way for you to get your message out there. And that's what we're going to do here on Cut to the Chase. So comment below. That's to the audience, because they're going to see this and then they could say, Gregg, maybe you should have grown some hair for this episode. I don't know what they're going to do, but they'll do something.
your hair like that. You look like you were shaved because of lice.
Maybe. All right. That's going to do it, Suzanne. We'll speak soon. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Give my love to Steph.
Will do. Okay.
All right.
That's all for this episode of Cut to the Chase. But before you go, will you open up your podcast app and give us a 5-star review? You can also leave a comment about what you liked most or other topics you'd like us to cover. And please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming shows. Thanks, everybody. Be safe out there.